All right. Good morning, you guys. How are you?
Good.
Right
Good.
on. Thank you. We are still waiting for Michelle Ballantyne, but in aviation, things happen often. And I believe she's on a midnight shift, so she could still be sleeping. There's a good chance. But she'll join us in a little while if she can. And if not, we shall continue on. So we're gonna get going here. So good morning to you guys. Good morning to the people who are jumping on to listen to the webinar this morning. So today we are talking to unicorns. Okay, so we have a little joke amongst ourselves that we call female AMEs unicorns because they're so rare. In fact, it's about 2%. Sometimes I hear 1%. So I don't know what the actual number is, but 1 to 2%. So we are talking to AMEs on our webinar this morning. So AME stand for Aircraft Maintenance Engineers. Now the news is talking a lot about flight attendants and pilots and the airlines, which it's wonderful. And we need to shed light on what is happening in those areas. But what about the people who work quietly behind the scenes, fixing the aircraft so that when you and I are out flying, we stay safely where we're supposed to be in the sky, which wouldn't happen without aircraft maintenance engineers. So we have spoken a lot before about pilot shortages, but did you know that pre-COVID-19, according to the 2019 Boeing Pilot and Technician Outlook, a whopping 769,000 new maintenance technicians will be needed to maintain the world fleet over the next 2 decades. The CCAA, the Canadian Council for Aviation Aerospace, was anticipating that by 2025, almost 5,500 new AMEs would be needed in Canada alone. And that was just to keep up with the industry growth and retirement. More than 25% of companies surveyed in 2018 reported that they are having difficulty filling aircraft maintenance positions, especially those related to areas such as structures and avionics. According to Transport Canada, this is crazy. According to Transport Canada, there were 17,662 active AME license holders in Canada as of June 26, 2019. Half of them, almost 9,000, half of them are over the age of 50. And of those, 50% are above the age of 60. I see an issue in our future for this. So now where do we go from here? Are the AMEs still working right now? Are there repairs that have to be done? Maintenance on aircraft sitting still, do we still need to repair those? I've heard many times that birds don't fly. Birds do fly. They don't like to be sitting on the ground. When they sit idle, they break. Is that true? How will the AMEs cope with the startup of flight again? Will they be overwhelmed? We are going to find out. So as always, we are going to talk to our guests about who they are, how they got into being aircraft maintenance engineers. Then we're going to move, after about 20 minutes, we're going to move into how COVID-19 has impacted them. And then the final 20 minutes will be about what if you're interested in becoming an AME, how do you get into it, and how do you choose what stream to get into, because there are different streams that you can get into as an aircraft maintenance engineer. So please welcome my guests. So today we have Alicia Paul. Hello, Alicia.
Hi.
Alicia is from Jazz Aviation, and she's actually self-isolating right now because she's traveling for work. We have Pam Cochran. Pam Cochran is coming from Whitehorse. She works for Air North, and Pam is a manager and who's actually now having to go back in and do some work in the hangar. So I can't wait to hear how that's going. Good morning, Pam.
Good morning, everybody.
And Lisa McGivery, she's a contracting aircraft maintenance engineer, which I didn't even know about. So we're going to find out what that is, what that looks like. She's from Ontario, and she speaks on our cross-country tour, and she's actually co-leading our aircraft maintenance competition team. I believe it's in Ontario, but we'll find out. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
So let's start off with the question, who are you and how did you get in to becoming an aircraft maintenance engineer? Because as I said, there are not a lot of women in this career. So Alicia, let's start with you. What brought you into this career, and what's it look like?
Sure. I get this question asked a lot. So I know this answer off by heart. I was very passionate about aviation growing up. So I knew right away after high school that was something that I wanted to gear towards. So I actually was interested in piloting. And then I went to the open house for our trade school here. It's called BCIT. And they had a booth for aircraft maintenance. And so I took a little gander and looked at the pamphlets. And I was really, really interested in that as well, because I've always been hands-on. So that really interested me. And I thought if I'm going to fly the planes, I should probably know how to fix them. Like that would go hand in hand. So I actually sidestepped the pilot thing for a bit and thought I would go back to it. But ever since I've done maintenance, I haven't looked back. And I think if I were to be piloting, it would just be more recreational for me now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. That's a very interesting story. How about you, Pam? What got you into this?
Well, I took my first aviation job when I was in high school as an aircraft groomer in the evenings. And aircraft grooming, it takes place around the same time the aircraft maintenance does. So I got to see firsthand what was going on in the evenings and was pretty interested and got to know some of the engineers. And the more interest I showed, the more they let me explore. And until someone suggested that that's something that maybe I should consider as a career.
Well, that's really good that you got the encouragement and the mentorship and not the other way around, which was probably possible as well.
Yeah.
And how long have you been in this as an AME?
As an AME, so I started my apprenticeship in 2004. I didn't get my license until 2010. I was a long-term apprentice, and I was, encouraged along by one of my senior managers to go ahead and write my license so I can get my endorsements and get that aircraft certification authority, get the raise, and so that's when I finally jumped on board to do that, and I've been at it ever since. So even in a supervisory role, even though I'm not still working on the floor, you get to maintain your license.
Okay. And Lisa, what got you into this?
It's kind of a different path. I started my career in aviation as a flight attendant for WestJet. That was, oh boy, 8 years ago now. And while I was a flight attendant, we actually had a rescue flight to the Bahamas, which is essentially an empty plane with mechanics going down to fix an aircraft that had been AOG, so aircraft on the ground there. So basically I sat with the mechanics and just kind of talked to them about their job, like, oh, what are you going to do? What's happening today? And the way they were describing their job with such passion, I was like, wow, like you guys actually love your job. It sounds so much fun. Like it's interesting. And they were like, well, since you already work for the company, you can come job shadow with us. So they kind of took me essentially like under their wing and allowed me to go into the hangar a few times and job shadow. And it was kind of like instantaneous that I was like, this is exactly what I want to be doing. Like, I love it. This is great. Everybody seems so happy. They enjoyed themselves. And I always liked working with my hands, kind of growing up as a kid. So naturally, it kind of was just a good fit for me. And then, that was 6 years ago now. And, I haven't looked back a single day. Like, it's been great. So I was really fortunate to have that kind of guidance alongside Pam, having people kind of help you out and guide you. It can really change your path, because had I not met that specific individual that specific day, my life path might have been completely different. And to this day, I'm still friends with him. So, it's been a great journey, and I'm really thankful for like that.
So do you think that, like, did you play Lego? Is that what you mean? You like to do things as a kid with your hands and stuff? Is it Lego? Is it like, what is it that maybe there's people out there or parents that are looking at their kids going, hey, maybe they should look into aircraft maintenance engineer because they like this. What would this be?
The thing is I grew up in the country. Like, I grew up in New Brunswick in a really small town. I spent a lot of time with my dad outside. So I kind of always had a knack for being outside and playing with different things. I wasn't really the type to kind of sit around and play with dolls. And that's just, you know, how I was growing up. I don't know why. It just, I liked it. And then I kind of got into the flight attendant role just to kind of step into aviation. But deep down, I knew, you know, that wasn't my career choice. And for some that is, and that's great. It's just, for me, it wasn't my passion. And then I finally just, a light bulb clicked the day I met that guy. And it was just, I'm so glad that it happened, you know.
Where are you from in New Brunswick?
Moncton.
Oh, okay. I lived in Moncton for a while. I grew up in St. John. So
Oh,
good
okay.
people.
Wow.
Good people out there.
Small town.
Yeah, yeah. Alicia, you know, what percentage do you hear? I mean, it's 1%, 2%. And why do you think women, why is it so few, the number so little? Why?
Yeah, I've always heard 2% as well. I think it's just people don't know about the job. It's you know, getting to the younger girls at a younger age and exposing them to all these different careers. I think that's the main issue. Like growing up, I never knew about this career. I had to kind of just find it myself, just because I was so passionate about the industry. But yeah, I think it's exposing the younger generation to at an early age will definitely increase those numbers.
Yeah, I hope so. It's everyone I talk to who's an aircraft maintenance engineer, they love their jobs. This is a common theme in aviation, but they love their careers. So so Alicia, another question for you. What does a day, and this is going to be for all of you, what does a day at work look like for you? So you show up at work, what do? You wander around the aircraft and, oh, that looks broke. Just kidding.
So I have two different type of roles that I've done at Jazz so far. So worked on the ramp, which is completely different from doing line maintenance. So on the ramp, for example, I come to work around like 5 p.m. and then we work, and this is when we meet the aircrafts at the gate to deal with any snags the pilots have if they're incoming. So if they have like an oil low caution light, we'll be called to the aircraft to go investigate. Usually it's just topping up oil, but obviously they want us to look at it. So yeah, that sort of stuff. And then the line maintenance is more later on in the night. We arrive around 9 p.m. when all the aircraft come back from flying throughout the day. And we have like work packages. So that's where the majority of like engine changes or wheel changes will happen at nighttime.
Now, are they ever surprised to see you show up, or it's just normal?
Surprisingly, I actually work with 3 other women at my job. So that for me was shocking. I had never worked with any other females before. So that was really, really awesome. But I mean, everybody always asks, you know, the same questions. Oh, how did you get into aviation? Like, how did you hear about becoming an aircraft maintenance engineer? That's always the first question I always get when people meet me.
Okay, Pam, let's dive into your job a little bit more, another level of what that looks like for you. And another question to add on to you is it harder for women to do it because there's heavy things that have to be lifted? Now, I've heard a few things about this because I've been talking about this, but I just want to get your take on it. So, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll answer the heavy lifting question first. So just like in any job, you just got to work smarter instead of harder. And there's so many tools these days to keep every employee safe when they're going to be doing any heavy lifting. So I haven't found anything you can't figure out a way to lift, and it's you know, pretty easy to build or make leverage. Like I'm 5'2" and only about 100 pounds, so I had to figure that out very quickly when you work alone or finding help. I think that's a big key. But now I'm doing quality assurance. So my job looks a lot different. My heavy lifting is a clipboard and a laptop typically, or a tablet. Yeah, so my average day is coming into the office and checking on any open non-conformances or any ongoing issues that had come up from a previous audit. So I check on, see how everybody's doing and if anybody needs any guidance. Navigating the corrective action procedures. I liaise with Transport Canada when they want to come in and have a look at what we're doing, and quite often they want to come and look and see what I've been doing to make sure that we're towing the line and everybody's following the regulations as they're supposed to. Some people might think it's a little boring, but I go and usually have a little walkabout and go and have a tea in the other hangar, see how the guys are doing. The most action I get getting out of the office is to go and actually conduct on-site audits. So sometimes I will visit our MROs or like our heavy maintenance facilities. I will go visit vendors occasionally, or I will tag along with our engineers and just do an observation on a project. So we did an engine change in Vancouver once, scheduled. So I went down and I just monitored the process and made sure that the guys are towing the line there. And yeah, it's good. It's diverse. Every day is different.
Well, it's really nice to know that there's options. Like, people like to know if they go into a career, there's options to move around within that. And a really interesting option that I just found out about today is contracting. So Lisa, explain that. So what does a day look like for you?
Well, I've spent the bulk of my career working in heavy maintenance. So just for those who don't really know the difference, like heavy maintenance is more so where the planes are sitting, 30 days plus, and it's more of a strip down when you're getting down to the bare essentials and really doing different repairs and different inspections. Line maintenance is more kind of on the go, busy, quick. This aircraft has a problem. It needs to fly almost immediately, so it needs to be rectified. So they're two very different jobs, and I have respect for both. I've done both. Me personally, I like working in heavy maintenance because it gives you kind of more time to really get to know an aircraft. So for anyone kind of up and coming into the industry, my personal opinion would be to start in heavy maintenance, because you really, you get to know the aircraft really well and see different things that you might not see on the line. And then as you progress in your career into line maintenance, you'll remember the things that you've already done in heavy maintenance. Like, oh, I know how this is connected. I've seen it all apart. And I mean, there's not to say you shouldn't start in line maintenance. That's a great career path too. They're very different, but the same. And they kind of make a nice complement to each other when, you've kind of dabbled in both, or you prefer one or the other. Everybody's a little bit different. And with contracting is more or less, so right now, because of the shortage of AMEs, which, we're all aware of all over the place, a lot of companies do offer contracting opportunities, which is great because it does give you an opportunity to make, quite a bit more money, but it also puts you in a position where you're very expendable, and, there is no term of employment. If the employer decides we don't have enough work, or we don't need you, or in a situation like what's going on right now, you're on your own, right? Like, there's not as much job security. So it's a bit of a gamble. Given the situation prior to COVID, it had been great. Lots of contractors everywhere were making great money and having a lot of opportunity. However, right now, companies are doing their best to keep their employees there and give them a job, which I totally commend them for, because there would be a lot more people, having a harder time going through the next couple of months without companies taking care of their own. So, I mean, I give them a lot of respect for that as well.
Yeah, they're definitely going through an incredible time right now.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys. Perry asked a great question. This question we get often, and I really want you to answer this. So, isn't part of the problem, here's this question, isn't part of the problem with the lack of female AMEs the same problem that exists with automotive mechanics or auto body shop technicians or tire repair shops, that the work is hard, dirty, and moving heavy pieces of equipment? You don't get the recognition that the pilots get. You're really unsung heroes of aviation. And I'm going to echo that. You are unsung heroes of aviation, because you're the reason I'll get on an airplane, for one thing. But what do you think of that? Like, this is such people think this about AMEs, but when I speak to female AMEs, it's totally different. Anyone want to jump on that?
I can start on that one for sure. From a person that grew up with auto mechanics in my life, that's my dad, my brother. Airplanes, helicopters are very different than automobiles. And I always make this joke that, airplanes and helicopters, typically you're working from above, whereas a car, you're underneath and you've got all the mud and the grease and everything falling on your face. Aircraft in general are maintained to such high standards, and they're clean to such high standards, that it's not, I don't think it's portrayed as clean as it should be. Like it's really not this really grease monkey job unless you're working on some vintage aircraft. Then maybe things might be a little bit different. But in the current day and age, the cleanliness, the standards, you have limitations on how much oil it can be leaking, and you have to have occupational health and safety standards to ensure that you aren't lifting and moving things by yourself, or you're not stuck out in the bush, MacGyvering something that's, very creative. That's the industry's really changed in that way.
Anyone else want to jump on that question too?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on it. I just want to start off by saying, like, personally, I don't like this question, and I'm going to tell you why. I find, questions like this kind of feed in and fuel the whole stigmatism that is the problem in the first place. I feel like, as a woman in the industry, the numbers are staggering. It's obvious that there aren't very many of us, but I feel like kind of drawing light to the fact that, like, oh, it's greasy, oh, it's heavy, oh, like there's these weird stigmatisms that girls shouldn't be doing these things. And it's something that bothers me deeply because, first of all, like, half the men, are just as capable of strength as I am. I'm not saying that I'm strong, because I'm okay, I think. I don't know. But realistically, like, in our job field, there's very few times where there's something that, I need help picking up. And if I do, it's never oh, you're not strong enough to pick it up. Someone will just help you. And, there's men asking the same question. So, like, I don't like the question just because I feel like it draws too much attention to, like, women are getting greasy and getting dirty. And I mean, it's irrelevant. It's a fun job that people like to do. And I personally think part of the problem is just people not knowing about the job, because, to be quite honest with you, I didn't really know much about it until I happened to run into mechanics, and I was 25 years old, right? I mean, so I understand the question. I get it. I've been in the field long enough to understand, like, people's views and how things are, but I do think that the question is kind of part of the problem in its own.
Well, we're here to change all that, right? And you guys are all part of the solution to how we're going to do that. Alicia, did you want to weigh in on that before we move on to the next question?
I'll just say that I kind of agree with Pam in that, yeah, our aircrafts are maintained to such a higher level compared to cars. So when people compare the two, I always jump in and say, no, like, our standards are way higher, and it definitely is not as greasy and dirty of a job people think.
All right. Okay. Perry, I want to say thanks for asking the question, because I loved just hearing those answers and what all three of you just said about that. And that conversation, we need to have it. We need to have this conversation more and more about women and aircraft maintenance and what it actually looks like. Let's go to another one. Pam, this one's for you. As an audit person, do you get pushback because you're a woman?
I would say it's quite the opposite. I find that I'm much more well received as a female, typically. Having been on the receiving end of audits, and still am, our regulators come in and audit myself. I think that there is a benefit to having the female soft touch, that people are much more open if you can come across in a much softer manner. I think it's actually a plus.
Next question, let's go with maybe Alicia, maybe you'll answer this one. Are you able to work on various metal, or are you qualified only on one version of an aircraft? For example, a 767 or a 737? Great question.
So for me personally, I have both my M1 license and my M2, so I can work on smaller general aviation aircraft, which would be like a Cessna 172 or something. And I do have my endorsements for Jazz fleet aircraft, so for the Bombardier 900, the CRJ, and the Dash 800-300 series. So it just depends on what type of training course that you go on, that your company will let you go on training for. That'll help determine what aircraft you're certified.
Okay. Here's another question. For a high school student, what kind of things would you recommend doing to get involved in this field if you're still in high school?
I know a lot of companies, well, I know specifically AAR and KF will offer kind of like smaller part-time jobs for high school students interested. And a lot of companies do offer job shadowing as well. So it's definitely something you know, if you're interested in aviation, I would totally take advantage of it and see if it's something that you enjoy, right? Like it's a great way to kind of get your feet kind of on the ground and get your hands dirty a little bit and see if it's something for you, right?
Mhm. Another one, and then we're going to move on to COVID here because I'm behind on it. Who are the people who control the maintenance program for the entire fleet? Do they need to hold an AME license? Look, anyone can answer that one? Pam?
I just typed a quick answer there to
Oh, you
Shreya,
do? Okay.
the question. So it takes an entire team to run a maintenance program for a fleet, even if you only have one type or if you have multiple types. Pardon me. And a maintenance license isn't required. However, it is an asset, and experience on the front line is definitely a larger part of that, so that you can understand what you are managing and how you can relate to who you're advising the work to and planning that work, but not required. No.
Okay. Okay. We're going to come back to some of these questions. So I just want to move on to COVID-19 right now. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Like I said, those stats at the beginning, staggering the amount of aircraft maintenance engineers that are needed in this industry. And what is that going to look like after? So let's just start with that question. What do you think this is going to look like after? Are we going to be back to that huge number that we need to fill, or do you think that's going to change in some way? Alicia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be difficult for our industry to kind of rebound from this. So I think it's going to take time, but there's still going to be a shortage of AMEs, regardless of this happening or not. Yeah, you saw the numbers and you read them out. I don't think this is helping in any way, and it's just going to make it even harder for everybody.
Thank you. Pam, what do you think of that? Like those numbers that I read that talked about the amount of people over 50 and the amount of people over 60. Like, are they going to come back to work? Some of them maybe not even going to return back after COVID? They're going to be like, I kind of like retirement. I think I'm going to stay retired. And what is that going to do to our industry?
Yeah, I agree. It's a really challenging time. It's hard to say. The experts will say that pandemics last 3 months. However, I think that it's going to have a much longer lasting effect on aviation, particularly for travel and tourism. And I think that you're right. What we were already facing was retirement. So now is a great time for people to get in and start thinking about your training, because maybe by the time that this aviation starts accelerating again, we will see that need again. Maybe we will have more people prepared to join us.
Yeah. So Lisa, what do you think of that? And do you think, this fall, hopefully the schools will be back up again, like SAIT? Do you encourage people to get in there? Because some people might be looking at aviation right now and saying, I'm not going to go near that industry. Look what just happened. But that's what this is about, trying to encourage people to stay in aviation, to continue with aviation. What do you think?
Personally, the thing with aviation is, yes, there's a pandemic. Excuse me, there's a pandemic right now, but people will always want to travel. Eventually the world is going to return back to, somewhat of a normal state, because that's kind of just how aviation is. If you look at the aviation cycles that have happened in the past, let's say 10 years, it's very cyclical, where, every 5 years or so, you're going to have too many mechanics, not enough pilots, too many mechanics, not enough pilots. And that the way that the curve has been going has been, a shortage of all of those things. And I don't think that this is going to change that shortage. I do think, once the world starts kind of returning back to its normal state, which it will, everything will go back to the way it was, and we will see a shortage again, because, there are quite a few people that have been offered early retirement packages at, various companies that, don't necessarily need to be named, but I know that quite a few individuals have taken those options, which will only add to the shortage that we're going to be facing when things do eventually go back to normal. So to answer your question, I do, and I would encourage students to pursue their aviation career, because there will be plenty of opportunity in the future. So I don't think it's something that should discourage them at all.
Mm-hmm. Alicia, how has COVID-19 affected you personally, at your work? So you're home right now. So is that your choice? Why are you self-isolating, and are you going back to work right away when you're finished?
So I was actually on a training trip to Halifax just like 2 weeks prior to this kind of uh, really getting bad in Canada, at least. So I was training out in Halifax at our base, and I was doing some maintenance control training there. So I was learning how to do all that stuff and kind of learning how our brain of our company kind of works. And so I was pulled off that just for safety reasons to come back to Vancouver. And so because I was traveling on multiple flights, I chose to self-isolate, just to stay safe and self-monitor myself to make sure I wasn't spreading anything at work. Um, yeah, I should be going back to work next week. Yeah, but we're still operating in Vancouver, as I know, doing line maintenance.
Okay, and Pam, what about you? Like, is there work to do right now?
Yeah, so the administrative side of aircraft maintenance continues. You know, the clock keeps ticking on the calendar. We are still operating, even if we are operating on a smaller scale. We've had to make some changes. So anybody that can work from home is working from home. So that's most of our management, which is myself included. However, due to some of our changes in our maintenance planning, we've decided to keep some of our heavy projects home, which is something we don't normally do, which is a choice to keep our engineers working as long as we can, but we need more help on the floor. So this has given the managers an opportunity to come in and give a hand. With the COVID, we have to maintain our social distancing even in the workspace. So we're having staggered shifts. We're only having a certain amount of aircraft, certain amount of people working on those aircraft at a time. It's been challenging to manage.
So Lisa, as I said earlier, there's that saying that, birds like to fly in the sky. They don't like to be sitting on the ground. And when they sit on the ground, things happen. Like, I don't know why, but apparently they break. So as we start looking towards the future and, starting to fly again, what does that mean for the aircraft maintenance workers? Does that mean like working nonstop around the clock to get these aircraft back up and running again? Or is it a matter of going in, starting it up?
Well, the simplest way to think about this is think about putting your car outside and leaving it there for a couple of months. When you go to start your car up, you're going to have problems. Your brakes are going to be rusty. The shift might be a little stiff, et cetera, et cetera. So, when you put that on like the scale of magnitude of an aircraft, I mean, it's quite different. There are quite a few procedures that go into place as far as preservation go, and different oils are being put in the engine to keep the engines preserved, because you can't just simply park an aircraft and leave it there, right? There are procedures that need to be followed. So that being said, bringing them back into service is a whole other project on its own. It's a one-by-one aircraft where you're, removing the preservation oil, you're topping up all the hydraulic fluid, you're running flight controls, and there's going to be kinks. I mean, if you're thinking about, for example, the MAX, they've been sitting for over a year now. You can't just go turn them on and fly them around. It's not going to happen. You're going to have, many different problems. Like, I would anticipate hundreds of hydraulic leaks and different issues that will come up. So there's going to be a lot of work when everything comes back into service. That being said, the way that the industry's going back into service will probably be staggered. So it should give, operators and different MROs plenty of time to kind of ramp things up and get them going one at a time rather than all at once. So it'll be a process for sure.
That just seems almost overwhelming to me, the amount of work that that will be in the future here very shortly. Okay, here's a question. Ready for this one? Alicia, let's start with you on this one. I'm just learning to fly in a Cessna. Hi, Caleb. I know the person who maintains the plane. He walks on water for me. I should know more about my plane. I took an online test about aircraft systems and did better than I thought, knowing nothing, but still need to learn more. I'm curious, as the people who keep the planes flying, what do you wish the general public and or pilots knew and appreciated about what you do? Great question. I want to know that too.
it's a lot of reading in the manuals and finding key information. That's kind of one of our main jobs, is making sure we can find what we're looking for, the exact thing. For example, finding a correct torque on a certain bolt. You have to know the thread type, you have to know the size of the bolt and certain specific things. So it's being very detail oriented. That's a very big key part of our job that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of.
Oh, okay. So appreciating the amount of work that you actually have to do. It's not just going out there and tightening something up. It's all the work beforehand and the knowledge that you have to know. Speaking of that, here's a question. When you're tightening a bolt that does not have a specific torque, and your male coworkers tell you to just do it hand tight or a little above that, how do you know you have the right tightness? I feel like I torque them too much sometimes to get the male strength, since I'm not as strong as the males. Who wants to take that question?
I'll go, I guess.
Sure, Lisa, thanks.
Technically you shouldn't be doing that. If you're really following the manuals, you can find a torque based on the bolt size, the thread count, like as Alicia was explaining, the thread count and the size of the bolt, and you should be able to find a specific torque for any bolt just based on using the chart conversions. So I would never recommend for someone to just be doing things hand tight. It's not written in the manual to hand tight anything. And if you're unsure of a torque, you should be using the chart to find the specific torque, because you are liable for everything you touch, right? So that's what I would suggest.
That sounds like really good advice to me. Did I step on someone, Pam? Were you going to say something?
I was just going to jump in.
Quality assurance here.
I know. I was just wait and see what the hands-on ladies here are actually doing. No. Standard practices. There's standard practices for every manufacturer, for every item, and it's documented. So that's where you're going to go. If you can't find your torque, you're going to go to your standard practices manual, and it'll be there.
Okay. Another question here. Is there software work that you guys need to do to keep up the airplanes? So is there a software part of it? Alicia?
I mean, I don't really think so for us. We use like an online system that tracks all of our like logbooks and stuff. But I personally don't take care of that whole program. I just log in and put in my information, and then we also have the same thing for our manuals online that get automatically updated. But I don't know who actually takes care of all that stuff and make sure it's up to date and the latest revision.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in on that question at all, or same?
Yeah, I could. There is a lot. There's a lot of different software programs too, and Alicia, like you mentioned, I'm not sure who does it, but there's a whole team, and everybody uses their own program. So your technical library is taken care of by one person. We have maintenance tracking systems that are printing out your future maintenance forecasts for you every day. The maintenance planners use the same. Well, we try to use one system for most things so that everybody can log in and have a look. There's a lot of software. It's not really typical for the frontline engineers to use a lot of it, because a lot of companies will try to limit electronic access. We want to have as few people inputting information into the system as possible. So you'll quite often receive a paper package. You can fill it out. It'll be reviewed by a supervisor or quality control, determine if that meets the requirements before it actually goes into your final electronic record.
Okay. Here's another question for you. When I hear the term engineer, I typically think of technology. Is there a tech side to your job, or is it mostly like being a mechanic? So the same line of questioning. Lisa?
Yes and no. I mean, it's kind of funny because, aircraft maintenance engineer, you hear engineer and you want to see the pinky ring on us, right? I mean, it's not a university degree. It's a little different. However, the avionics side is more of a technical kind of technology type job. So it's a different path. There's maintenance engineers and there's avionics. So avionics would be more software related and wire related, where mechanics would be more wrench turning. So it's a little bit different in that aspect, if that makes sense.
Okay. Caleb just added to his question when he was talking about the software. He says on here, I was thinking about the MAX with the software question. we all know about that, and how wired the smart planes are now. What do you as AMEs, how do you interact with the software of the aircraft?
So I'll just butt in here. So for our aircraft, our avionics usually deals with updating that software, and so I personally don't have any say in what happens there. Like I don't really know what goes on for the avionics side. Sorry.
Okay, well, let's move into the training aspect in our last 20 minutes here. Before we move away from COVID, we kind of already did. Does anyone have any last words on the impact that COVID has had on you now, either personally or with your company?
It's challenging. I can speak to that a little bit as a single mom at home. So the schools are closed for the remainder of the year. So it's working from home. It's homeschooling. Daycares were closed for a very brief time. So it's managing, it's balance, and it's the challenges of not being able to reach out to our normal supports, whereas everybody is staying home. So it's very difficult to call up a girlfriend and be like, can you take the baby for a day so I can do some work? It's just that we can't do that right now. We're all just trying to stop the spread. So trying to make sure that everybody takes care of themselves and then chip away at the workload. That's the key, is keeping that balance.
Yeah, that is tough. That is tough. And so many people are facing that right now. And I just wish that we could do something to help everybody in that way. Okay, we are going to move on to the training. So what I know about AMEs is there's 3 streams. If there's more, I don't know. I know there's 3 streams, I believe: mechanics, structural, and avionics. So who can tell me a little bit more about that? Like, what do? You decide you want to be an aircraft maintenance engineer, but now you're looking at, what do I actually go into? So can someone speak a little bit about all 3? Lisa, you're nodding. Do you want to start?
I just nod all the time, but basically what happens is when you go to school, your program's 2 years long, and your first year, it's kind of a general, you're going to get to know aircraft's basic 101 of, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Year 2 is kind of when you're going to decide which path you want to take. And, everybody's a little bit different. If you're more of a hands-on person, you're probably going to lean towards mechanics. If you're more of a software wire kind of person, then you're going to lean more towards avionics, and then structures is a whole different thing. So it's really kind of based on your personal preference. And the good thing is when you're in your first year of school, you'll kind of get to dabble in a bit of each. You'll kind of just know, because everybody's a little bit different in that aspect, right? So it's kind of really just comes down to personal preference. And, each job has its rewarding parts and its its ups and downs, but it's really up to you, like kind of which path you want to take.
Okay. SAIT has career in a year. Have you heard of that one? I believe it's I think it's structural. Pretty sure it's structural. Like career in a year, you can go in, and after 1 year you can have your structural license, but then I guess there's still, you have to do your apprenticeship after that. And really interesting. So what do you guys really think about, back to just trying to get, and the reason I'm talking about this so much is because there's so few women in your field. What do you think we can do to get more women into aircraft maintenance engineers? Alicia?
So yeah, like I mentioned before, is just like getting the word out at a younger age to a younger audience. So even starting at elementary school and planting that seed, just so that they know that it's an option for them. Because when you're in high school, that's kind of when you start planning for your future and your college. So if they have that seed planted early on, at least, they now know it's an option. I think that will be really, really helpful for future generations. And then also having like the events that you host with, the cross country tour and speaking to people. It's really great to get women in our community, speaking about their careers and different careers that they're doing right now.
Okay, how many schools are there in Canada that you can go be an aircraft maintenance engineer? Yeah.
I don't know how many in Canada. I can tell you a little bit about Western Canada. So out here in the West, we don't have anybody in the Yukon, but the closest is we have Dawson Creek, Northern Lights College. Or in Vancouver, you have BCIT. And then if you go into Alberta, we just have SAIT. NAIT closed their program a few years ago. But the other thing that is open to Canada-wide is the ICS program, they call it. So the International Correspondence School. And it's a learn from distance basic diploma for your aircraft maintenance. There's some differences than what you're going to get for if you went away to SAIT. Like you won't be credited with the 18 months towards your apprenticeship, so you still have to do your 48 months, and you still have to do all your tasks, and you have to challenge the Transfer Canada exams at the end, which can be quite monumental because this is the route that I took as I was already in the industry. Once you get out into Ontario, we've got Canador,
Centennial.
Sorry, I can't remember where else.
Centennial.
Centennial. Yeah, there's probably at least a dozen. And Red River and Winnipeg, they're there. The opportunities are there, and they all offer different programming. And you did mention briefly SAIT's accelerated program. I didn't know if they were still doing that. I know that Structures is typically about a 10-month course, but they did at one time offer an accelerated 10-month course for your M license. This was probably about 10 years ago, so I wasn't sure that it was still available, but I remember there was a very high demand for it. So if they are still running it, I think that's a really great option. Yeah, there is courses out there.
What does it cost to become an aircraft maintenance engineer when you take one of these courses? Is it pretty much the same whatever school you go to, do you know, or does it vary quite a bit?
I think that the tuition is probably the same, but there are differences in the courses and the differences in the way that you can attend. So for example, Red River College in Winnipeg, you can have, if you're already working for an airline, you can have them sponsor you, and you can attend that school in the same aspect you would any other trade. So you would attend for a few weeks every few months throughout a span of 4 years, as opposed to just signing up for 2 years flat at a college. A lot of people find this much more affordable, and but you do need that backing from your employer saying, yes, that we think this person is a good candidate for this type of learning. It's much more economical to stay home and do the ICS course if that's something that you feel that you have the mental capacity to do. And then I, encourage if you're already in the industry. So I would take my homework to work and I'd be like, hey guys, can you explain how to calculate the bore or the displacement, and get that sort of hands-on. It depends if there's a college or university in your hometown where you can go home every day. So I think there's a variety of options for your economical status.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we know becoming a pilot is extremely expensive, and people want to be in aviation, and they want other options to be able to stay in the industry. So I think this is a great option. We have a question from Dina. Hi, Dina. So Dina, we may have covered this a little bit, but so Dina says, when I escorted, so Dina is part of our Elevate exec team, and she took our, we were the first all-female team together with United and Pratt & Whitney down at the International Maintenance Competition down in the USA 2 years ago. So Dina has taken our team down there. She says, when I escorted the Elevate AME team to the competition in Orlando, there were about 20 tasks for the team to divide up and conquer. This looks so much fun. I watched it online. It just looks incredible. According to their specialty, these tasks include things like avionics, radial engine repair, and even changing tires. What are your specialties or preferred tasks? So do you have something that you like more than something else, but that you have to do? Whoever wants to jump in can.
I like changing tires more than I like greasing the gear. I mean, that seems like a pretty standard thing across the board, I'm sure.
I was just thinking, routine inspections, it can be very easy to get complacent, and they're not my favorite. Your opening panels, you're looking at stuff that still looks pretty good, so you got to be really detailed and really focused. I much prefer troubleshooting or you're changing components, something like that where there's step-by-step process. You've got your manual out, you're doing this, you get to check it after, maybe run an engine, much more involved. routine inspections can be long sometimes.
Alicia, how about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I like to get more hands-on, so I like the troubleshooting. I like changing components, especially engines, because they're a bigger job, and like seeing it from start to finish. It's very gives you a lot of satisfaction to see it and then actually run it after to make sure it's actually working is like such a good feeling. It's very rewarding at the end of the day for me.
You know, as an air traffic controller, they always talk about, oh, air traffic control is the most stressful job in the world. And you know, we answer to that. But I often think what you do must be so stressful because if you do something wrong, if you leave, I don't know, you leave a bolt where it shouldn't be, um, that can cause devastating effects. So do you guys feel that weight and are you stressed by it? Lisa?
I think the way that aircraft maintenance is structured, and a lot of people might not know this, is there's a lot of redundancy. I mean, for something that's like a critical, let's say you're changing aileron cables, you're going to have 2 independent inspections and, you know, 3 other people look at it before it's even signed off. So yes, there are parts of the job that are a little bit stressful, but for the most part, everything is very redundant and very safe for these reasons, right? So it would be less likely that anyone would make a critical error like that because there are so many eyes kind of looking at your work and looking at all the things being done. So in that aspect, it's a little less stressful and a lot safer.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I like to add too, like from the office side of things, we make sure that everybody is trained thoroughly. And one of the things that we train on over and over is human factors and self-awareness too. We train on, you know, the dirty dozen and the rest, but if you're just thinking like, wow, I'm really distracted today, I'm really tired, maybe I shouldn't perform that critical task, and that is okay. We endorse 100%. Making sure that our staff feel comfortable. If they don't, we will find something else.
Wow, sounds like I would want to work for your company. Okay, so kind of a silly question, but I've been on an airplane before and the maintenance workers come on and they're doing something because we can't leave. Often they'll say it's air traffic control delays, but they can't say that if there's an AME on board. And you know, everyone's sitting there and often I think, should I get off the airplane? Like, you know, how do you feel? Have you guys actually been on when the passengers are on and you have to go in there and fix things? Is that stressful? Do you care? Or like, do you see people getting worried around you? I'm just kind of curious from your point of view because I see it from the passenger side.
So I can talk a little bit about that since I'm working on the ramp. That's kind of what our job is. When we meet an aircraft at a gate. So usually there are passengers either coming off the airplane or just going on. So it is really awkward when you're trying to get something done, but you know, the people just don't understand that, you know, we're trying to do our job here, but they want to get into their seat or they're watching us work while we're doing something critical. And it's, you know, people are pulling out their phones and stuff. So it makes it really uncomfortable for us when we're just trying to do our job, right? But yeah, it's a little bit weird. Or if you're working down outside by the window, like on a landing gear or something, people are always staring out the window looking at you.
Are they taking pictures? When you say they pull it out with their phone, are they actually taking pictures?
I've seen people, yes, take pictures or pull out their phone and take a video, just because, you know, you never know what's going to be on the news. And yeah, it's really weird with social media these days.
Does the company, do they touch on that in your training at all, or that's just something that just happened?
I don't think because it hasn't really been an issue. I personally haven't experienced an issue with it, so they haven't really touched on it, or maybe I haven't asked.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, I don't know. I just know that when the aircraft maintenance people get on the airplane, I'm like, oh. But obviously, you're very capable and safe. So, okay, let's just recap let's talk about people that want to become aircraft maintenance engineers and they're in high school. Let's just go back to that for a minute as we finish. So we're out there, you all know with Elevate Aviation, we're out there trying to convince people to come and look at aviation, and aircraft maintenance is one of the ones that we're really pushing hard for and saying, hey, especially to ladies with Elevate, we deal with ladies a lot, and we're saying, hey, look at these careers. So just a recap, what should they be doing now if they decided they want to be in aircraft maintenance? Should they be piling up on the math and the sciences? Does that really matter? Will you learn whatever you need to know, whatever you take in high school, when you get on your course? Lisa?
You know, yes and no. Going into school, there's definitely a lot of math and there's a lot of physics that you do need to know, but it's something that you're going to learn. I feel it's a little different for each person. I feel a lot of it's very hands-on. I learned more touching things and getting to know different aircraft parts and you know, kind of getting my hands in there and understanding components more than I learned reading a book about it, if that makes sense. But that's just the way that I learned. So each person's kind of like a little bit different. But that being said, I mean, having great aptitude and good math and science marks in school is certainly going to help you excel in your career.
Okay, Alicia, we're going to do a final word here as we start to wrap up. I want to talk about mentorship. So at Elevate Aviation, we have mentors. I believe you're all mentors with Elevate. And how important is it to have a mentor? And I know Pam's already touched on it. We're going to touch on it again. So for you, like having someone to encourage you to go into this, like, is that important, do you think?
100%, yeah. Because there aren't very many females to reach out to, or at least when I was doing my program and working, I didn't really have any female role models to kind of go to or look up to. But the PRM that I was working with, he took me under his wing and really taught me everything that I know, and really encouraged me to kind of push forward and like pursue more management roles and get into like quality assurance and try and go into the different departments that I didn't even know were possible. I thought, you know, I'm just going to be a maintenance engineer for, you know, 2015 years, sorry. But yeah, there's a completely different side, and he really opened my eyes to all those different opportunities. So I think it's huge.
Pam, how about you? So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, there's a picture of the first woman who ran the Boston Marathon. I love this photo. So she's running in the Boston Marathon, and the organizer is trying to pull her off because women aren't supposed to run the Boston Marathon. And the men in the race are pulling him off of her. And it's so powerful when you see this picture, because you're like I tell this to men. Men are needed in this to help women become successful. Do you feel that through the mentorship avenue?
Yeah, I agree with you. And honestly, throughout my career, I've run into very few roadblocks that weren't supportive. I found that most men are actually very receptive to the idea. I think a lot of now what are going to be our retiree groups really recognize what the industry needs and are really opening up to anybody in the labor pool come on in, right? So I think what most mentors are looking for is a mentee that's got an open mind and that's willing to learn regardless of their gender or their age. I feel that having more women mentors though is maybe more encouraging. Sometimes it's easier to relate if you are a young woman and you have another young woman or older woman that's gone through it already, that you might relate on a better level. But in general, I think the men are also great mentors.
Okay. Lisa, can you just, for the last thing here, can you just talk about, if you are a mentee, what's your responsibility? Like the world is not just going to come to you on your lap and you take what you want. Like you need to put a little bit of skin in the game. So as a mentee, what should you do? Like I'm encouraging them to call and find a mentor. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are kind of maybe a little more reserved and shy, but you know, this is a no judgment zone. There's no stupid questions. There's nothing wrong with, you know, anything you want to know. I would encourage them to ask absolutely any question they have, whether they think it's silly or not. It doesn't matter. It's just your way of figuring out whether this is what you want to do or how to go about the path that, you know, you're kind of leaning towards. And I think it's just a matter of reaching out a bit more and kind of putting yourself out there, which for some people might be a little more difficult, but you could do it electronically if you want, if that's easier, you know, rather than a face-to-face. Some people prefer just write an email, whatever the case, you know, they just need to kind of engage just a little bit more, because, you know, all four of us are kind of sitting here and we're ready and open and willing to answer or help in any way that we can. So it's just a matter of, you know, spreading the word and having them ask us whatever it is they need.
Okay, well, that wraps up our hour. So I want to just chime in on that too and say, you know, if you want to be an aircraft maintenance engineer, or if you know someone who you think would want to become an aircraft maintenance engineer, just encourage them. Or if it's you, you know, open your email, send an email. You can email us. We have so many mentors that are here, ready, willing, waiting, but it needs to be on you a little bit too, that you pick up, you know, you pick up the ball and you put it into action, and you take your life in your own hands and start asking questions. There's amazing people that are here that want to help. So I want to thank you guys so much, the panel, for being here, for talking about your careers. I think talking about women in aircraft maintenance is an interesting subject, and we need to do this more and more and more. And I know that you guys are all going to be out there speaking with us. I want to thank everyone that joined us today to listen and ask questions. Thank you so much. A reminder that you can, if you're not on our newsletter, go to info@elevateaviation.ca, sign up for the newsletter so that you can be aware when we do more of these. This ends our 6-part series of aviation frontline workers and COVID-19, but we are going to move into another area with the webinars and feature more guests. So sign up for the newsletter so you know about them, and please reach out for a mentor if you want a mentor for anything. And that's it. We'll see you guys next time. And thank you, ladies, so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And stay healthy, safe, and we'll touch base again. I'll see you guys all again soon.
Okay, thanks, Kendra.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.